Elijah Caldwell was 40 years old, and the night his wife looked across the kitchen table and told him she wanted the lake house too, he did not say a single word in response. He had been expecting that particular demand for 11 weeks. He drove a 7-year-old F-150 with a cracked side mirror and work boots that spent more time in the truck bed than on his feet. Her friends called him Steady Eddie when they thought he couldn't hear, and her mother called him practical, which in that household meant something one step above dull. Naomi believed she had accurately assessed what she was married to: a salaried civil engineer with a joint checking account, and a man who spent his weekends at a lake house she had always assumed was as much hers as his. 2 names on the deed, everything divided the way reasonable people divided things. There was no mortgage on that lake house. There never had been. And the name on the deed was not a name she had seen written anywhere in 9 years of marriage. What she did not know, what she had never once thought to look for, was that the entity holding that property had been structured and sealed long before she knew Elijah Caldwell's name. $1.4 million in properties and held assets, documented, protected, and entirely unreachable. She finished making her case with the calm confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. He told her he would have his attorney look into it. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Elijah Caldwell had owned the lake house for 15 years before Naomi ever walked through the door. His grandfather, Elmore Caldwell, had built it by hand in the foothills of the Blue Ridge in 1961, a 2-room cabin that became, over the following decades, a 4-bedroom house with a wraparound porch and a dock that extended 30 feet over the water. When Elmore died, he left it inside a trust structured by the family attorney in Roanoke, and when Eli's father died 5 years after that, the trust passed to Eli alone. He had been 23. He had driven up to the lake that first weekend and sat on the dock until midnight, listening to the water, understanding that what he had inherited was not simply a piece of property, but an obligation to build things worth keeping. He had spent the 16 years since doing exactly that. The porch needed work that October. Eli arrived on a Friday evening with his truck bed loaded, fresh decking boards, a cordless drill, a belt sander, 2 cans of finish, and spent Saturday morning on his knees replacing the boards that had gone soft over the winter. The lake was still behind him. The air smelled like pine and cold water, and the particular quality of Blue Ridge mornings that he had never found a way to accurately describe to anyone who hadn't sat in one. His grandfather used to say, "The things worth building are the ones worth showing up for on the cold mornings." He had said it about the lake house. He had said it about everything else, too. Eli had finished 2 sections of decking before Naomi came outside at 9:30 with a cup of coffee she had made for herself, and the particular expression of a woman tolerating a place she had long since stopped genuinely enjoying. She stood at the screen door and watched him work for a moment. She said the deck looked fine. She went back inside. He noted it without comment. She had been coming to the lake with decreasing enthusiasm for the last 2 years. What had once been something she wanted, the quiet, the water, the weekends where nothing was required of her, had become something she endured. He had watched the shift happen the way all shifts happened in a marriage. 1 skipped weekend, then 2. Then explanations that were technically true, but weren't really the reason. He had met Naomi 10 years ago at a professional development conference in Richmond. She had been working in commercial real estate, property valuations, development assessments, and she walked up to his exhibit table and asked him 3 precise questions about load distribution in mixed-use structures that told him immediately she was not there for small talk. He had answered all 3. They had dinner that evening and talked until the hotel bar closed. He had thought, here is a woman who understands what the work actually is. He had thought about that dinner many times in the past 8 months. Tucked in the center console of his truck, in the slim leather document holder his father had given him the day the LLC was officially registered, was a quarterly summary of the Caldwell Reserve Holdings portfolio. Naomi had never seen it. He had never offered it. The finances of the LLC had always been managed through a separate account she had no access to, and, as far as he knew, no knowledge of. He had been reconsidering that assumption for several weeks. He was finishing the third section of decking when his phone buzzed in his back pocket. It was a text from Vivian, his real estate and estate attorney in Virginia Beach. "Call me when you have a minute. Nothing urgent. Something you should know." He set the drill down. He called. Vivian answered on the second ring. Her voice had the measured quality of someone who had weighed the information before deciding how to deliver it. "Someone made a formal inquiry at the county recorder's office last week," she said. "A records request. Your name specifically, a search on property holdings registered to Elijah D. Caldwell in the city of Virginia Beach and Roanoke County." He was quiet for a moment. "Who filed it?" "A law firm. Hendricks and Park. Family law practice out of Norfolk." Eli looked out at the lake. A heron stood at the far end of the dock, absolutely motionless, the way they always stood, patient, observant, waiting for the water to show them what it was hiding. "All right," he said. "I'll be in touch Monday." He thanked her. He ended the call. He did not go back to the decking immediately. He sat on the tailgate of the truck and thought for the length of 1 full minute. He was not surprised. He had been watching small indicators accumulate for months. The locked phone, the trips described with slightly too much detail, the way she had begun asking questions about the lake house's value with the specific casualness of someone who had already researched the answer. His face was completely still. He went inside to refill his water and found what he had half expected to find. On the kitchen counter beside the coffee maker, Naomi had left a yellow legal pad. She used them for work notes and grocery lists, had left them on counters their entire marriage. This one had 3 lines near the top in her handwriting. "Lake House, Blue Ridge, Est. Value $380, 420K. VA Beach Rentals X2. Assessed separately. Hendricks and Park. Confirm apt Thurs." Below the attorney's name, a separate name, Preston Hale. He photographed the page from 2 angles. He set the legal pad back exactly where he had found it, at the same angle, with the same pen resting across it. His hands did not shake. He went back outside. He finished the 4th section of decking. He ate the lunch he had packed. He answered Naomi's question about dinner with an answer and a small, ordinary smile. He drove back to Virginia Beach on Sunday evening. On Monday morning, he called Gerald, his financial advisor, who managed both his personal accounts and the LLC's investment position, and asked him to pull the last 8 months of activity across all shared accounts and document any variance from the normal pattern. Gerald called back before noon. The findings were systematic. Over a 7-month period, Naomi had made 11 transfers from the joint account to an external account Gerald did not recognize, ranging from $600 to $2,100, always on days when Eli's work schedule was long and predictable. Total, $16,400. She had also retained a moving and storage company on a quote request covering a 2-bedroom household relocation. She had not mentioned it. He built the documentation methodically, without skipping steps, the way his grandfather had taught him to build anything meant to hold. He opened a folder on his laptop. He named it, Caldwell v. Naomi. The photograph of the legal pad went in. Gerald's transfer report went in. Vivian's notification about the records inquiry went in. The name Preston Hale went in with a flag. The name took 12 minutes to research to a useful level of detail. Preston Hale was 44, Senior Development Director at a commercial real estate group in Norfolk. His social media was managed carefully, the kind of careful management that communicated active impression control. He had been tagged in 2 photographs with people from Naomi's professional network, both from events in the past 18 months. Eli cross-referenced those dates against Naomi's shared work calendar, which she had set up years ago and had not thought to revoke. 7 of the 11 account transfers had gone out on evenings when her calendar showed client receptions or work dinners. She had no idea, not once in 9 years of marriage, that he had been reading the full shape of the life she was building alongside the one they shared. He added everything to the folder. Then he picked up his phone. "Vivian," he said when she answered, "I need to come in this week. Bring Dwight if you can reach him." She said she could have both of them by Wednesday afternoon. Vivian Marsh had managed real estate and estate law in Virginia Beach for 21 years. She was 58, direct, and had the particular economy of someone who had learned that the shortest path through legal complexity was the one that began with documentation and stayed there. Dwight Okafor had administered the Caldwell Reserve Holdings Trust structure for 17 years. He was 67, meticulous, and had known Eli's father well enough to attend the funeral and stay for the repast. He sat across the table on Wednesday afternoon with a kind of calm that communicated nothing in this folder was going to unsettle him. Eli laid it all out: the legal pad photograph, the records inquiry, Gerald's transfer report, the moving company quote. Preston Hale. They reviewed it without rushing. When they were finished, Vivian spoke first. "The records inquiry tells us what she believes she found," she said. "Your name is attached to 2 VA Beach properties through the county assessor's public database that's accessible to anyone. What's not visible in the public record is the ownership structure. She found your name. She did not find the LLC. She doesn't know the LLC exists," Eli said. "Then she's walking into this assuming those properties and the lake house are marital assets held in your personal name." Vivian paused. Her attorney is about to make a very confident argument based on very incomplete information. Dwight set his hands flat on the table. "The $16,400 is recoverable. The lake house, the VA Beach rentals, and the LLC's cash position are entirely protected. Pre-marital structure, no commingling, origination documentation going back 6 years before the marriage. She has no claim to any of it." He paused. "When we produce the deed, and she sees the name on it, her attorney will try to characterize the LLC as a marital entity. I've written the brief that answers that argument. It is thorough. She will not win it." "Good," Eli said. "We file this week," Vivian said. "Before she does." He agreed. Real Power operated in quiet rooms. This was one of the quietest rooms he had ever sat in. That Thursday, Eli drove west to Roanoke to see his uncle Theodore, his grandfather Elmore's youngest son, a retired civil engineer who had spent 32 years on Virginia highway infrastructure, and who had been present as a witness at the founding of Caldwell Reserve Holdings LLC the year Eli's father died. Theodore was 71, spare and unhurried, and lived in the house Elmore had built on the outskirts of Roanoke with the same practical care his father had applied to everything he touched. Eli told him what was happening. Theodore listened without interruption. Then he stood, went to the study at the back of the house, and returned with a manila envelope he had been keeping for 11 years. "Your grandfather left this with me," he said. "He told me, 'Theo, when the day comes that someone wants to take what this family built, you give this to the lawyer and you don't apologize for a single word in it.'" He set it on the table between them. I think today might be that day. Inside was the original deed to the lake house, the 1961 version, in Elmore Caldwell's name, alongside a handwritten statement by Elmore describing his intentions for the property and the chain of inheritance he had established. It was not a legal instrument, but it was testimony in his grandfather's hand about what the lake house was and where it had always belonged. Eli held the pages carefully. He used to say, Theodore said, settling back into his chair, that a man who builds something worth having will always attract people who want to take it. He said the answer to that was not to build less. The answer was to build better records. Eli refolded the pages. He placed the envelope in his inside pocket. He drove back to Virginia Beach in the dark, and the Blue Ridge receded behind him, and he thought about his grandfather building that cabin in 1961 with his own two hands, and he understood, not for the first time, the full weight of what it meant to protect something like that. Gerald delivered the full Preston Hale background on Friday morning. It was not a reassuring picture. Hale's development firm had been named in a breach of contract suit by a Chesapeake property owner 2 years prior, settled out of court, terms undisclosed. His personal credit showed 2 collections accounts and a debt load that outpaced his declared income by a significant margin. A financial disclosure on file with his employer revealed he had borrowed against a retirement account the prior year and not repaid it. He was not a man of resources. He was a man performing prosperity with borrowed instruments, and he had apparently decided Naomi was a useful vehicle for extending that performance. Vivian added the Hale background to the file. Not for the hearing, for the record. That Sunday evening, Naomi made dinner, and Eli set the table, and they ate together in the ordinary rhythm of a household that had not yet formally acknowledged what both people in it already understood. She asked about the decking repairs at the lake house. He told her it had come out well. She said they should try to get up there before winter set in. We should, he said. He poured her water. He asked about her week. She told him. He listened with the particular attentiveness of a man who understood that listening was itself a form of documentation. After dinner, he dried the dishes and she put them away, and they moved around the kitchen with the practiced ease of 9 years of shared space. And he thought, not for the first time, about what it meant to stand this close to someone and already know everything. He went to his office and confirmed that the complete Caldwell v. Naomi folder had transmitted to Vivian's secure server. It had. Some men waited to be seen. He had been building something else entirely. The mediation conference was held at Vivian's offices in Virginia Beach on a Tuesday morning in November, 4 weeks after she had filed the initial petition, and 6 days after Naomi's attorney, Hendricks, from the family law practice in Norfolk, had received the full discovery response and had, according to Vivian, gone very quiet on a phone call before asking whether there was any possibility of error in the documentation. There was no possibility of error. Eli arrived with Vivian and Dwight. He wore a charcoal jacket and the expression of a man who had already completed all the necessary work and was present to deliver the result. Naomi arrived at 9:15 with Hendricks. She was composed in the polished way she had always been composed in professional settings. Controlled, presentable, carrying the quiet confidence of a woman who believed she understood the shape of the morning ahead of her. She looked at the table. She looked at Dwight, whom she did not recognize. She settled into her chair. Hendricks opened with the demand list. Division of joint marital assets, equitable split of the Virginia Beach properties at assessed value. And she said it with the particular emphasis of someone presenting what she considered her strongest argument, the lake house in Roanoke County, valued at approximately $400,000, which had functioned as shared marital property throughout the duration of the marriage, and to which Naomi had contributed time, care, and personal investment over 9 years. Hendricks placed a printout of the public property record on the table. Eli's name was on it. She waited. Vivian opened her portfolio without hurry. The first document. Gerald's transfer report. 11 transactions. $16,400 over 7 months. Every one time-stamped, every one itemized. Documented dissipation of marital assets, Vivian said, setting it flat on the table. The second document. The legal pad photograph. Date stamped, clearly legible. The lake house value estimate. The VA beach rental notation. The attorney's name and appointment confirmation. Naomi's handwriting. Naomi looked at the photograph for a long moment. The third document. Dwight opened his briefcase and produced the deed to the lake house. Not the county assessor's printout Hendricks had brought. The actual deed. He set it down and turned it so Hendricks could read it clearly. The name on the deed was not Elijah D. Caldwell. The name on the deed was Caldwell Reserve Holdings, LLC. Hendricks read it twice. She looked at Dwight. This entity, is this registered to Mr. Caldwell? It is, Dwight said. He produced a bound packet from his briefcase. The LLC's articles of organization, its registration date, its member documentation, and its complete property schedule. The lake house, the 2 Virginia Beach rental units, and the LLC's current cash and investment position. Registered 15 years prior. Premarital by a margin of 6 years. Continuous and unbroken documentation with no gaps and no ambiguity. Caldwell Reserve Holdings, LLC was established by Mr. Caldwell and his late father before the marriage, Dwight said. The lake house was contributed to the LLC's holdings from the original Caldwell Family Trust. It has never been in Mr. Caldwell's personal name. It has never been co-mingled with any jointly held marital financial instrument. It is not, and has never been, a marital asset. He set the operating agreement on top of the deed. Current combined portfolio value of Caldwell Reserve Holdings, LLC, $1. $4 million. The room was very still. Naomi was looking at the name on the deed. Caldwell Reserve Holdings, LLC. She had been married to this man for 9 years. She had driven up to that lake house 50, 60, 70 times. She had slept in the bedroom his grandfather built, and eaten dinner on the porch his grandfather designed, and sat on the dock his grandfather had extended over the water by hand. She had assumed, for every one of those years, that the house was as much hers as his. She had never once looked at the deed. I didn't. She started. She stopped. I didn't know this existed, Eli. If I had known, if I had understood what the... I know you didn't know, he said. The words were not unkind. They were not sharp. They were simply the precise truth of the choice she had made, which was not to know. Hendricks leaned in and spoke quietly into her client's ear. Naomi sat with it for a moment. Then she said, I think this is a misunderstanding. I think we should talk, just the two of us, without attorneys in the room. I think if we stepped back from all of this and just talked, I think there's something here that can still be. Naomi, he said her name the way he stated findings in a structural report, without elevation, without performance, with the measured clarity of a civil engineer describing a load-bearing reality to someone still hoping it might be something else. You retained an attorney in October. You had Preston Hale walk the perimeter of the lake house last month. You moved $16,400 out of our joint account over 7 months. I know what was planned. I know when it started and who was involved and what you thought you were walking into today. He paused. There's no misunderstanding. He stood. He gathered his copies. Vivian has the complete filing, he said. Everything is in order. He looked at Naomi one final time, without bitterness, without any desire to see her reduced. With the settled, finished expression of a man who had protected what his grandfather built and was now prepared to leave the room. "My grandfather built that lake house by hand in 1961, he said quietly. "Every board, every nail, every foot of that dock. He left it to my father, and my father left it to me, and I have spent 15 years making sure it would outlast both of them." He picked up his jacket. "It was never going to be part of this. You just never asked whose name was on the deed." He walked out. The hallway outside Vivian's office was quiet and carpeted, and received the pale November light through a window at its far end. He walked the full length of it and pushed through the door to the parking garage and stood for a moment in the cool concrete air, alone, unhurried, the way a man stood after a long job had finished exactly as it was designed to. He got in the truck. He drove north. 6 months had passed like water over the stone pier of his grandfather's dock when Eli sat on the repaired porch of the lake house on a Saturday morning in May and drank his coffee as the light came up over the water. He had sanded the porch railing over the winter, stripped it down to bare wood, and refinished it with a clear coat that let the grain show through. His grandfather would have done the same. He worked on the house every season. There was always something that needed the attention of careful hands, and he had never once minded that. The Caldwell Reserve Holdings portfolio had expanded in the spring. He had acquired a third rental property in Chesapeake, a 4-unit residential building that had been undervalued by its seller and correctly assessed by Eli through the kind of structural and market analysis his training made second nature. It was fully tenanted. Dwight had updated the portfolio summary. Total valuation had crossed $1.7 million. He had also been asked to lead the structural assessment team for a municipal bridge rehabilitation project in Roanoke County, the largest assignment of his professional career to date. He had accepted, without ceremony. He was already on site twice a week, standing on the old bridge in the early mornings, reading what the structure had to say about time and pressure, and what held and what didn't. A landscape architect named Josephine had come up to the lake house twice this spring. She worked on watershed restoration projects for the state, the long, patient work of helping ecosystems recover if you gave them the right conditions and stopped interrupting what they were trying to do. She asked questions about the lake's ecology, the way she asked questions about everything else, with genuine curiosity, without performing the interest. The second weekend she came, she had brought seeds for a native plant border she wanted to establish along the eastern bank. He had not objected. She was there now, down at the water's edge in the early light, crouching over the soil with her hands in the earth, working in the morning quiet the way people worked when the work was something they genuinely cared about. He had heard about Naomi through mutual acquaintances in the way of a small professional world that kept its own accurate record. The settlement had given her the equity in their Virginia Beach home and a division of the joint account at its corrected face value, less the $16,400 Vivian had fought for and received. She had moved to an apartment in Norfolk. 2 colleagues she had counted on in her professional circle had quietly created distance once the circumstances of the divorce became known. Preston Hale had relocated out of state after the breach of contract suit against his development firm was formally filed. She had not, as far as anyone knew, been in contact with him since. Eli noted all of it with the same composure he brought to any data point. He registered it. He moved past it. He was not free because she had ended up with less than she planned for. He was free because he had stopped carrying the weight of someone who had spent 9 years looking for the floor of what he was worth and had never once thought to look up. Josephine called something up from the bank about the soil composition along the eastern edge. He answered. She laughed at something in the answer and went back to her planting. The lake was still in the early light. His grandfather had looked at this same water for 30 years from this same porch and had built something he trusted to outlast him. It had. He had built everything worth keeping. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.